My name is Heather. I was 27 when my parents looked me in the eyes and told me I wasn't wife material. At first, I thought it was just another backhanded comment, a moment of poor judgment. But then they gave my fiancé to my sister, and not in a metaphorical sense. I mean, they quite literally chose her, Megan, and handed her everything I'd built: the man, the future, even my business. Megan had just come back from Los Angeles. She called it a spiritual reset, but really it was just another crash after another glamorous failure, this time in public relations. She had no job, no plan, just the same magnetic smile that people forgave everything for. She moved back into our parents' home, the one with the magnolia trees and the perfect lawn in Charleston. And just like that, everything started shifting. The first shift was small: dinner plans. My mom would invite us over, me and Adam, but Megan would already be there, sitting at the counter, wine in hand, barefoot like she lived there again. I didn't think much of it. Adam was polite, even awkward around her. But my mother, her eyes lingered too long when Megan laughed. Her voice softened when she suggested Megan join us next time. You know, she said once, swirling her Chardonnay, some women just have a natural glow. It's not a criticism, Heather. You're solid. But Megan? She shines. I laughed then, actually laughed. You're saying my little sister is more, what, wifely than me? No, no, she said, touching my arm. You're stable. That's not a bad thing. It didn't feel like a compliment either. Adam and I had been together for 2 years. We met at a design event, him a carpenter with an eye for structure, me a floral designer with a booked-out calendar. We made sense, steady sense. He proposed on my birthday. In front of my parents, my mother cried. My father shook his hand. I thought, finally, I'm not the afterthought. Then the weekend retreat came up. My parents planned it every spring, rented cabins in Asheville, bonfires, long hikes. This year it happened to fall on the same weekend Adam and I had blocked for wedding venue tours. When I brought that up, my mom just blinked. Well, maybe you can skip this one. It's not mandatory. Adam didn't say anything. He just nodded. I didn't go. They did. A few days later, scrolling through Facebook, I stopped cold. A photo, my dad's profile, a big group shot in front of the cabins, everyone there. And there she was, Megan, sitting beside Adam, their legs angled toward each other like it was instinct. I stared at it so long my coffee went cold. I called Adam that night. It wasn't intentional, he said. She just offered to drive them. I thought it would be weird to say no. Then we were all there, and it just happened. What just happened? I asked. You shared a cabin? He paused. It was a group lodge. You never mentioned any of this. I didn't think it mattered. I hung up before I could say something I couldn't take back. That night I got a voicemail, not meant for me. My mother had called earlier, but she must have accidentally hit record. I listened without thinking, and then again, with my heart in my throat. I mean, it's obvious, she was saying. Megan fits. Adam lights up around her. You've seen it. Then a pause. Aunt Julie's voice. And Heather? She'll be fine, Mom said. She's always fine. The message ended. I didn't cry. I just sat on the floor, replaying it, replaying the moment I realized I'd been written out of my own life without even being asked. 3 days after the voicemail, I showed up at my parents' house without warning. Not to cause a scene, just to see their faces. I needed to know if they could lie to me with the same softness they used to whisper me away. The front door was unlocked. The house smelled like cinnamon and butter. Saturday morning. I wasn't expected. I heard clinking dishes from the dining room and walked in just as my mother said, "More coffee, sweetheart?" It wasn't to me, it was to Adam. And there he was, sitting at the head of the table like he belonged there. Megan was beside him, one hand cupped around her mug, her other reaching toward the fruit bowl. My father was folding a section of the newspaper. My mother was buttering toast. I froze in the doorway. Megan was the first to look up. She blinked, not startled, just surprised, like she'd forgotten I existed. Heather, she said, standing slightly, didn't know you were coming. I wasn't, I replied. Adam stood, slowly. Hey, that's all he said. That's all. Just hey, like we were passing in the grocery store. My mother didn't look at me. She reached for the preserves. My father coughed. We thought you were busy this weekend. I wasn't, I said flatly. No one moved. Finally, Megan offered, "You want a plate?" I almost laughed. I shook my head and stepped back. I think I've seen enough. And I turned and walked out. They didn't follow me, not one of them. Back in my car, I sat with my hands trembling on the wheel, breath tight. My body wanted to cry, my brain refused. Something inside me was changing, cracking, reforming into something colder. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew this: I would never show up unannounced again. I would never again step into a room where I wasn't wanted. That night, Adam texted, "Sorry you saw it like that. Wasn't what it looked like." I didn't answer. The next day, I walked into my studio, the floral shop I had built from nothing, and found my mother inside. She stood by the hydrangea rack, holding a clipboard, talking to my assistant. "Just finalizing next month's order," she said, smiling. I stared at her. She had never come in before without warning. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Relax," she said, breezy. "I was nearby. Thought I'd help out. You've never helped with supply runs." Well, maybe it's time I did. I felt it then, a shift, not just in tone, in control. Something was happening beneath the surface. "Where's Caroline?" I asked. "My studio manager." "She stepped out to grab lunch," my mom said, still flipping through the clipboard. "Don't worry, I'm not rearranging anything." But she was. Every stem bucket had been shifted half an inch. Every price tag was freshly relabeled. I didn't say anything, just walked to the back office and closed the door. 10 minutes later, Caroline knocked. "Your mom said you wanted her to update the pricing strategy," she said, a little confused. "Should I go with her numbers?" My stomach dropped. I told her no, but the seed had been planted. By Monday, 2 long-standing clients canceled contracts, both citing creative differences after speaking to my mother about expanding the brand. By Thursday, Megan posted a photo on Instagram. A bouquet, my design, my signature triple-layer spiral technique. Except the tag didn't say my studio. It said Blossom plus Bramble, a new name, a new brand, a soft pink logo. I stared at it for a full minute before my brain caught up. She was launching a shop, and she was using my designs to do it. I spent that night digging, not emotionally, logistically. The bouquet Megan had posted, my design, was unmistakably mine. Even the angle of the shot, the muted tone palette, the ribbon knot, identical. She hadn't just copied it, she'd mirrored it, right down to the camera filter I always used. I pulled up the business account I hadn't touched in weeks, the one I used to track local industry vendors. Blossom plus Bramble was registered just 3 weeks earlier. Same town, new address, my delivery driver's route, my delivery driver. I texted him, "Ever drop anything off to this name, Blossom plus Bramble?" His reply was instant. "Yeah, thought it was your new pop-up, same cooler bins, same invoice format." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Then I drove. The address led me to a small brick storefront on Beachmont Avenue. Still under renovation, but the signage was up, pale rose gold, delicate serif font. It looked like me. It looked like my studio, but stripped of everything personal, repackaged into something more palatable. There was a man inside talking to a contractor. I recognized him immediately. Walter Conroy, my father's accountant. I didn't go in. I just stood across the street and watched. I drove straight to the house. My parents' house. They were in the backyard, my mother trimming rose bushes, my father adjusting the umbrella over the patio table. Megan sat on the porch swing, scrolling her phone like she'd always lived there. I walked across the lawn like I had every right to be there. Because I did. My mother looked up first. "Heather, darling, we weren't expecting—" "You funded it?" I said, cutting her off. My father straightened slowly. "Excuse me?" "Blossom plus Bramble," I said. "You paid for it. You used my vendor accounts, my driver, my designs." Megan stood now, hands in her pockets, calm. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said, stepping closer. "You're being a thief." "Watch your tone," my father said sharply. "I will not," I snapped. "You used my name to get discounts. You used my systems. That's fraud." My mother's expression didn't change. She just folded her gloves neatly into her apron pocket. "It's not fraud, sweetheart. It's family." That word, family. They used it like it justified anything. "You've always been the type to get lost in details," my mom continued. "Logos, credits, inventory spreadsheets. Megan's more visionary." Megan smiled, like that was a compliment. "You didn't even ask me," I said, voice low now. "There was nothing to ask," my father said. "Megan needed a fresh start. You already had your chance." "My chance?" I choked on the words. "I built that studio from a garage. I slept on the floor for a year. I missed 3 Thanksgivings to cover wedding bouquets. That was my chance?" "You're stable," he said. "You'll recover." I laughed. It was bitter, cold, and then I walked away. Back to my car, back to the studio, back to a world where I had no illusions left. I pulled the vendor contracts that night, every single one. One by one, I emailed to terminate, not out of surrender, out of strategy. If they wanted my systems, they'd get silence instead. No suppliers, no inventory, no back-end support. And I made new calls, private ones, to names I hadn't spoken to in months. Clients, collaborators, journalists who'd once begged for features. If they were building a business with stolen parts, I would dismantle every bolt. The florist side of me had gone quiet. What replaced it was colder, strategic, exact. Every morning that week, I sat in my office at the back of the studio, canceling supply accounts with one hand and drafting cease and desist letters with the other. My phone buzzed constantly, clients asking why Megan was messaging them, stylists confused why their invoices had been redirected. I didn't answer any of them directly. I let the silence speak. On Thursday, I got a call from Tall Pines Estate. That name stopped me. Tall Pines was one of the most exclusive wedding venues in the South. Booked out 18 months in advance. Private gardens, carriage house reception hall, a 5-figure deposit just to get on the calendar. I hadn't contacted them in months. Adam and I had toured the grounds last winter, walked hand in hand through the rose corridors, him saying how the brick paths felt like permanence. The event coordinator sounded confused. "Hi, Heather, just confirming final floral layout for next month's ceremony." "I think you have the wrong Heather," I said slowly. The woman hesitated. "Your name's on the original inquiry, last November, reserved under Heather Doyle. Events still listed under that. Heather Doyle, my name, still tied to a venue I hadn't spoken to since before everything crumbled." "Can you tell me who made the deposit?" I asked, heart thudding. She paused. "We have it down as Margaret Doyle, same billing address as the previous invoice you sent." My mother, she used my name, my design proposal, my booking history. I swallowed. "And the bride and groom's names?" Another pause. "Apologies, we typically don't share. It's my name on the reservation," I said, sharper than I meant to. "I'm the one who toured it. I'm the one who submitted the application." More typing on her end. The active file was transferred to Megan Doyle and Adam Bryant last month. I didn't answer. I couldn't. "Is there a problem?" she asked. "No," I said, forcing my voice steady. "No problem, just a misunderstanding." I hung up before she could say more. That night, I didn't go home. I drove, past the venue, past the city line, out into the rural back roads where the sky wasn't ruined by light. I parked on the shoulder of a gravel loop, turned off the engine, and sat in silence. Megan was using everything, my name, my clients, my venue, and Adam, he was standing beside her, smiling for the camera. I'd seen it that morning on her story. They were in front of a bakery, her caption, "Cake tasting day with my favorite human." My lungs locked. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel. I remembered the night he proposed. We were on the rooftop of my old studio, fairy lights overhead, hands sticky with champagne. "You always make things bloom," he'd whispered. "Even me." I laughed then. I'd believed him. Back then, I still believed people chose love over spectacle. I was wrong. Back at the studio, I unlocked my laptop. I pulled up the old presentation, the one I'd made for Tall Pines, full of renderings and palette concepts and seasonal bloom guides. I compared it to the mood board Megan had just posted online. She hadn't even changed the color codes. She was building a life out of the ashes of mine, and everyone around her was clapping. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. The invitation never came, but the cake tasting was already on the calendar. Mine, not theirs. I still had the original venue planning schedule saved in my files, and my mother hadn't thought to change any of the times when she transferred the booking to Megan's name. That Saturday, I dressed with surgical intent. Not to cause a scene, just to observe. I arrived 10 minutes before the appointment, wearing black slacks and a high-collared top. Professional, neutral, unreadable, the way a florist dresses when stepping into enemy terrain. The bakery was soft-lit and elegant. One of those boutique places where frosting is called texture and the staff wear linen aprons like art students. The woman at the counter recognized me. "Oh, hi. You're early, but your sister and the groom are just pulling in." I didn't correct her. I waited. Megan swept in first, blonde hair pinned in a romantic twist, face fresh, glowing. She wore a pale blue sundress, the kind that looks effortless but costs more than rent. Adam followed behind her. He didn't see me at first, not until the hostess said, "Right this way, party of three." His eyes locked on mine. Everything behind them froze. Megan blinked, lips parting. "Heather?" "Didn't want to miss the tasting," I said, my voice level. After all, the deposit was mine. There was a pause, the kind that thickens the air. The hostess smiled nervously. "Oh, should I set an extra place?" "No need," I said, stepping ahead. "I know what I'm here for." The table was already arranged with sampler tiers: classic vanilla bean, lemon lavender, chocolate ganache. I remembered the email chain where I'd requested the exact flavors. Megan sat down slowly. Adam remained standing. "I didn't know you'd be here," he said, careful. "No one told me I wouldn't," I replied. My gaze didn't waver. I took the fork, sampled the first slice, deliberate, unshaken. "This one's dry," I said. The baker chuckled awkwardly. "Oh, that's just the test texture. The final will have raspberry compote." "It had it last time," I said, cutting her off. "When I was here with him." Megan's mouth pressed into a thin line. She didn't look at Adam. "Just said, 'This is wildly inappropriate.'" I placed the fork down gently. "And yet, so is building a wedding on stolen plans." "No one stole anything," she snapped. My hand flicked to my tote. I pulled out the original proposal binder. My sketches, design palette, table placements, and yes, the dessert schedule with my name at the top. I laid it between us. "This," I said, tapping the first page, "was mine." Megan didn't touch it. Adam stared at the paper like it might catch fire. "You should go," she said tightly. "I'm not here to fight," I replied. "I'm here to let you know I see everything, every peony you copied, every stem you traced, every lie you let settle like sugar on top of rot." I stood, took one last look at the slices. "Enjoy the cake," I said. "I hope it sticks in your throat." Then I walked out. The sunlight outside was harsh, honest. I didn't cry, I didn't shake. I just walked down the street like it was mine, because I had built every block of this life. They'd stolen the stage, but they hadn't read the script. Not yet. Caroline never snooped. She was the kind of assistant who respected boundaries with military precision. That's why the look on her face when I stepped into the office said everything. It was early Monday. I'd stopped by the studio to grab a binder and leave again before clients started rolling in. I wasn't in the mood to smile, not anymore. But Caroline stood frozen behind my desk, a folder in her hand, not mine. "Where did you get that?" I asked. She turned slowly. "It was left in the drop box outside. No name, just this." She held it out carefully like it might explode. I took it. Inside, a dozen printouts, emails, contracts, financial projections, and one scanned page from a local Chamber of Commerce application: proposal for joint ownership transfer of a design-based enterprise. The names: Megan Doyle, Margaret Doyle, and Adam Bryant. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. Caroline's voice was quiet. "I think someone wanted you to see it." I dropped into the chair. At first, the words didn't line up. My brain refused to stitch the logic. But the signatures were there, dates too. My mother had co-signed a funding agreement transferring brand assets into Megan's name. Not just support, control. And Adam, his name was listed as business consultant and logistics partner. Underneath, a clause detailing back-end account access, including vendor databases, design files, and client rosters. It wasn't identity theft, it was surgical erasure. Caroline hovered near the door. "Do you want me to?" "No," I said, cutting her off. "Close it." She nodded, stepped out, and shut the door behind her. I sat in silence. 5 minutes, then 10. By the 15th, I stood. I pulled out every contract I'd ever signed with clients in the last year. Cross-referenced emails, traced signatures, highlighted overlaps. The dates told a story even my rage couldn't have written. Weeks before the breakup. Months before Megan came home. It had started long before I knew. The stealing wasn't spontaneous, it was planned, strategized, executed. My studio hadn't been collateral damage. It had been the goal. The wedding? Just an aftershock. I pressed my palms against the desk, cold sweat running down my back. I needed a walk. No, I needed evidence. I called Ryan, my former web developer. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year, but I knew his voice instantly. "Heather," he said. "Wow. Been a while." "Quick question," I said. "Did someone request admin access to my site backend this spring, like under my name?" A pause. "Funny you ask," he said. Your mom emailed in March, said you were traveling, gave me a temporary password. Seemed legit. My pulse roared in my ears. Did she download files? Couldn't say. I just granted access. Thought you knew. I thanked him, hung up, closed my eyes. Every confirmation hit like its own slap. Not fast, not brutal, just relentless. My mother had impersonated me. Adam had processed logistics. Megan had posed with the flowers. It wasn't favoritism anymore. It wasn't preference. It was invasion. I waited until nightfall, not because I needed darkness to do it, but because I knew that's when he'd be alone. Megan would be at her bar class, scheduled and tagged on every calendar she touched. She was predictable like that. Adam still lived in the apartment we once shared. He hadn't even changed the mailbox label. Doyle Bryant. Like it still meant something. I knocked twice, no hesitation. He opened the door barefoot, hair damp, t-shirt rumpled. For a second, he looked like the man I almost married. Then he saw the folder in my hand, and the way his eyes dropped told me everything. You should have called, he said, voice low. I did, I replied. Last spring, you didn't pick up. He stepped aside. I walked in. Same couch, same shelf of design books I bought for him our first Christmas together, same coffee table I refinished during the lockdown summer. I sat without asking. He didn't speak. I opened the folder, pulled out the contract, laid it on the table between us, his name, typed, printed, signed. Explain this, I said. He didn't look surprised, just tired. Your mom said it would help her structure things, he said finally. She didn't want Megan to start from zero. You mean she didn't want me to stay above water? He shook his head. It wasn't personal. No? I leaned forward. Because it looks a lot like the man who swore he loved me, helped dismantle my entire life, and reassemble it under someone else's name. Adam's jaw clenched. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like, I said. Because from where I sit, it looks like you used my trust as leverage. He looked away. I didn't. I didn't know she was going to take the studio ideas, he muttered. I thought she just needed a direction. Your mom said you'd been struggling, that you might step back. Step back? My voice cracked. From my own company? I didn't mean. Yes, you did, I stood. You meant every word when you told her I wasn't wife material. When you let her convince you I was just steady, replaceable. He flinched. I heard the voicemail, I added. That broke whatever defenses he had left. He looked up, raw now. She told me not to tell you, he said. She? I repeated. Megan, he said. And your mom. They didn't want to upset you. I laughed. Cold. Empty. They wanted silence, so they could finish rewriting the story before I realized I wasn't the main character anymore. Adam swallowed. I didn't know how to stop it. You didn't want to? He didn't deny it. I picked up the folder. Last chance, I said. Are you still in? A pause, then. It's not what you think. That's a yes. I walked out, didn't slam the door, didn't raise my voice. Because the truth was louder than anything I could have screamed, and it had already landed. I didn't plan to find the date, but betrayal has a way of leaving breadcrumbs, especially when the people betraying you believe you're already irrelevant. The wedding invitation arrived in a stack of redirected mail from my old address. No envelope, just the cardstock, perfectly square, embossed with silver leaf script. Megan Doyle and Adam Bryant, June 24th, Tall Pines Estate. I sat on the studio floor and stared at it. They didn't even change the venue. They just took what was mine and stamped their names on top of it like a monogram. Caroline walked in mid-moment. She saw the card in my hand and didn't say anything. She just lowered herself to the floor beside me. I thought you should know, she said quietly. They've been sending previews to vendors. The flower schemes match your spring collection, down to the centerpiece dimensions. I didn't blink, just nodded once. Then I stood. I walked into the back room, pulled out the locked drawer where I kept unused samples, and found the swatch booklet Megan had begged me to let her look through for inspiration 6 months ago. Every page had a post-it. Every post-it was missing. I flipped to the notes I'd rewritten in pencil on the inside flap. Her handwriting, my outlines, it wasn't just imitation. It was identity theft, but emotionally laundered through family ties. They thought I'd be too hurt to fight back, or too ashamed. But shame has a funny way of transforming into something cleaner when you burn through it long enough. That afternoon, I called Tall Pines. I didn't ask to change anything. I just confirmed my original reservation name was still in the system. Heather Doyle. Yes, they said. We remember you? Yes, the original deposit is still noted. The name on the contract remains tied to the original inquiry. Great, I said. That's all I needed. They didn't even ask why, because no one expected a ghost to come back. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I walked the perimeter of my studio, running my hand along the shelves, the coolers, the counter I'd built from reclaimed walnut. Everything they'd tried to copy, repackage, and claim as their own started here, in this space. With my name, June 24th, 3 weeks out. Time enough? Just barely. The next morning, I placed 2 calls, one to my lawyer, the other to someone I hadn't spoken to since college, a woman who now ran events for a high-profile nonprofit and owed me a favor after I saved her entire gala centerpiece order 2 years ago with 12 hours notice. Both said the same thing after I explained. Send me everything? I did, and then I waited, not idly, not passively, with precision. Every move I made from that moment was laced with intention. I wasn't aiming for destruction, I was aiming for exposure. They wanted a wedding? Fine, but I wouldn't let them take vows in a garden I'd cultivated with my own hands without facing what they'd buried to get there. The morning was quiet. Sunlight filtered through the trees over tall pines like nothing had ever gone wrong there. Like love was still pure and betrayal didn't bloom beneath rose trellises. I pulled into the gravel lot at 9:58 a.m. The event coordinator met me at the gates. Miss Doyle, she said, smiling as if we hadn't spoken in weeks. We're just finishing up the floral installation meeting. Perfect, I replied. I brought someone. Behind me, a woman stepped out of the car. Smart blazer, neutral heels, a briefcase tucked neatly under one arm. My associate, I said. We didn't offer more. Inside, the reception garden looked like a carbon copy of my original vision. They hadn't changed the layout. The pergola stood exactly where I'd marked it. Even the string lights followed the mock-up I'd submitted during my own engagement. And there, walking through the space with a clipboard in hand, was Megan. She wore soft beige linen, like a lifestyle blogger at golden hour. Her hair in that loose twist again. Aesthetic over authenticity. Her face paled when she saw me. The clipboard dipped slightly. Behind her, Adam froze mid-sentence. I didn't look at him. I stepped forward, slow, deliberate. You're early, Megan said tightly. You're late, I replied. This was my booking. You're just borrowing it. Her nostrils flared. The event coordinator, visibly nervous now, tried to bridge the silence. We can go over final layout confirmations? There's no need, I cut in. I'll handle that. Adam's voice finally emerged. Heather, come on, this is childish. I turned to him, calm, controlled. What's childish, I said, is building a ceremony on someone else's blueprints and calling it destiny. The woman beside me stepped forward then. Excuse me, she said, professional but firm. We're here to inspect the grounds per the original booking agreement, still held by my client. We'll be reviewing the setup under intellectual property clauses and use of design restrictions. Megan's lips parted. You're suing us? Not yet, I said, but today we're walking through my wedding. A pause. Then Megan laughed. It wasn't real, just brittle noise. You didn't even want this anymore. No, I corrected. I didn't want you taking it. The planner hesitated. Should we reschedule? No, I said firmly. I'll walk the grounds. My associate will document everything. And that's exactly what we did. Every table placement, every arch angle, every script font on signage, all captured, all recorded. Megan trailed behind us at first, trying to make conversation with the planner. Adam stayed near the water station, jaw clenched, eyes avoiding mine. I didn't speak to either of them again, not because I couldn't, but because they didn't deserve another word. We finished the walkthrough in under an hour. As I turned to leave, the associate handed Megan a sealed envelope. Per notification requirements, she said. What's this? Megan asked, even as her hand trembled. An official cease and desist regarding further use of proprietary content, venue design concepts, and name-based affiliations tied to Heather Doyle's brand. You've been formally served. I didn't look back as I walked away. The wind carried the scent of peonies. Mine. The studio was quiet when I returned. Caroline had stepped out to grab supplies, and for once, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned, cleansed, like the air after a thunderstorm. I took off my jacket, hung it on the hook, and stepped behind the front counter. Everything was in place. The eucalyptus bundles, the preserved garden roses, the polished copper scissors I only used on final arrangements. I ran my hand across the counter's edge, grounding myself. Then the bell above the door rang. I turned. Julie, my aunt, my mother's older sister, the one who'd vanished from family holidays after a mysterious disagreement a few years back. She walked in like she belonged there, tall silver hair pulled into a braid, expression unreadable. "Thought I might find you here," she said. My mouth went dry. "Julie?" She nodded once. "Don't panic. I'm not here to ask you to be the bigger person." I said nothing, just gestured toward the small seating area in the corner. She sat. I joined her. Silence passed like a tide. "I left that folder," she said plainly. I blinked. "What? The one Caroline gave you?" "I left it in the Dropbox." I stared. "I tried to stay out of it," she went on. "I really did. But when your mom told me about the studio, about how she was fixing what you'd started, I realized she wasn't talking about helping. She was talking about replacing." My breath caught. "She used to do it to me too," Julie said, voice quieter now. "In high school, in college, always stepping in, calling it guidance, but really it was about control. Your father enabled it. And now it's Megan's turn." "She said I was solid," I whispered. Julie looked at me. "And what's wrong with solid?" she asked. "Bridges are solid, foundations, the things that hold people up. But your mom always preferred sparkle, and sparkle doesn't last. It just blinds." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I didn't know who else saw it," I admitted. "I saw it," she said, "and so did your grandmother, before she passed." That stopped me. Julie reached into her bag and pulled out a velvet pouch. Inside was a key. "What's this?" "Her lockbox," she said. "In it are letters, notes, and a copy of the original inheritance draft." I looked up sharply. "She left the business stock options to you, Heather, not Megan. But your mom redrafted the family documents after the stroke, quietly, said it was too late to argue." My chest constricted. "All these years," I murmured, "I thought she just didn't believe in me." "She did," Julie said. "Julie, she just wasn't louder than your mother." I held the key like it was an artifact, because to me, it was. "Why now?" I asked. Julie smiled softly. "Because you finally stopped asking for permission." We sat a while longer, not talking. There was nothing left to explain, only things left to reclaim. The safety deposit room was colder than I expected, a steel vault behind frosted glass in a suburban bank 2 towns over, quiet, sterile, untouched by drama. The kind of place people forget holds everything that matters. Julie waited in the car. She didn't need to see what was inside. She already knew. I placed the velvet pouch on the counter, unfolded the paper with the box number, and signed the access slip. The clerk nodded and handed me the narrow, weighty drawer. I took it into the side room alone. The box was simple, matte gray, smooth, locked with a brass clasp that clicked like a breath being held. I opened it. The first thing I saw was handwriting, my grandmother's. I recognized the curve of the H before I even finished reading the first line. "To my Heather," it began. "You were always the one with roots." I blinked fast, refusing to let tears blur the rest. There were more letters, one for each year from my 12th birthday to my 25th. She'd written them in advance, tucked them in envelopes, labeled with scrawled dates in pen that had begun to fade. But one wasn't in an envelope. It was folded once, carefully, and taped to a notarized document, the original inheritance draft. It named me sole recipient of her 30% stake in the Doyle Family Trust. A clause outlined mentorship succession for any family-owned business under the Doyle name, explicitly connecting her share to a granddaughter operating a floral or design-based enterprise. There was only one of those. Me, not Megan, not ever. Attached was a final paragraph, handwritten, post-stroke, shaky but legible. "If Margaret changes this, no, it's not with my blessing." My breath caught. This wasn't just a transfer of wealth. It was a map, a final act of belief, buried under my mother's edits and distractions. I sat there for a long time, reading her words again and again. Her voice came back to me in pieces, over breakfast, during car rides, while trimming flowers with her on the porch. She never told me I was brilliant. She told me I was anchored. And I never realized that was what she meant to give me. When I left the bank, the sun was higher, brighter. Julie was leaning against the car door, sipping a bottle of lemonade. I didn't have to say anything. She saw my face and nodded. "Go get it recorded," she said. "Don't wait, and don't warn them." I didn't. By 3 p.m., I was sitting in the office of a business attorney 2 cities north, someone neutral, someone with no connection to the Doyle name. She scanned the papers, asked one question, then filed everything. Ownership status, restored pending. Objection window, 2 weeks. That night, I returned to the studio and pulled every document my mother had touched. I drafted a formal challenge letter to the Trust's council. But that wasn't the part that made my hands shake. The part that did? Opening the 12th birthday letter. It ended with one sentence. One day, they'll try to erase you. And when they do, let your roots crack concrete. I didn't sleep the night before, not out of nerves, out of precision. Every ribbon, every stem, every call list, curated. The arrangement I was building wasn't for a client, not even for an event. It was for closure. I arrived at the studio before sunrise. The air still held the chill of night, but inside the coolers were humming. Caroline had laid out the blooms I'd requested. Nothing showy, nothing extravagant, just symbolic. Calla lilies for clarity, snapdragons for strength, Dusty Miller for silence. No roses, no peonies. Not this time. I arranged in total stillness. No music, no phone, just memory and purpose. By 8, the bouquet was done. I wrapped it in deep gray paper, sealed with a plain white tag. Then I drove. Not to the venue. That came later. First, I went to the Chamber of Commerce downtown, the building where my mother had submitted the forged ownership transition, where Megan had signed her name under creative lead, where Adam's initials had appeared beside strategic consultant. I walked straight to the front desk and handed over the envelope. Inside, notarized copies of my grandmother's original documents, including the trust clause that invalidated any unsanctioned revisions. The receptionist blinked. "Would you like to make an appointment?" "No need," I said. "By the time anyone responds, the wedding will be over." I turned and left. Next, the venue. It was set to open at noon for vendors. I arrived at 11:45. The florist team Megan had hired looked confused, but not alarmed. I carried my bouquet like I belonged, and in a way, I did. The guestbook table was being set. I placed the bouquet directly in the center. No note, no card, just presents. One of the planners looked up. "Excuse me, who sent that one?" I smiled. "The original designer." She blinked, then nodded slowly. As I walked back toward the parking lot, I saw the catering truck pull in. Behind it, a familiar car, my parents' Lexus. They didn't see me, but I saw them. My father talking on the phone, sunglasses on, my mother checking her reflection in the side mirror, adjusting a strand of hair that refused to stay down. I watched for a full minute, not as their daughter, not as the girl they thought would fold, but as the woman who now held the paper trail they'd pretended didn't exist. I left before Megan and Adam arrived, because this day wasn't about them anymore. It was about ending the chapter with the same grace they never offered me. When I got back to the studio, Caroline was waiting with 2 things: a letter from the trust's attorney, formal acknowledgement of my challenge, and temporary freeze on all disbursements, and a message from a wedding guest. They'd seen the bouquet, and they'd recognized the work, not because of the design, but because of the silence it carried. The morning after the wedding was quiet. I didn't check my phone right away. I brewed coffee, watered the Dusty Miller hanging in the window, lit a candle that smelled like cedar and citrus, something clean, like a reset. Only then did I reach for it. 17 missed calls, 6 voicemails, none from Megan, none from my mother. Just one name blinking at the top of my notifications, Adam. I didn't listen. I tapped the last message instead. It wasn't a voicemail, it was a video. I hesitated, then pressed play. It was blurry at first, shaky footage from someone's phone. The reception hall, the music was low, the kind of instrumental track couples choose when they want something sentimental but forgettable. Then the camera steadied, and there was Megan at the sweetheart table, alone. The chair beside her, Adam's, was empty. The voice behind the camera whispered, "He's gone, left during the toast, didn't even take his plate." I froze. The clip cut off. My fingers hovered above the screen. A second message followed, from Caroline, just a line of text. "They're blaming you." I stared at the words, then laughed. Not cruel, just tired. Of course they were. That was the story they'd always told themselves. If something cracked, it must have been Heather pressing too hard. Heather asking too many questions, Heather refusing to disappear when told. But I didn't care what they blamed anymore. I cared what he chose. And he chose to leave. Not for me, not toward anything, just away. From the table he helped build. From the vows he scripted out of someone else's blueprint. From the girl who wore borrowed lace and stood in a garden she didn't plant. I stood by the window and watched the light shift across the floor. The silence in my studio felt different now. Not hollow, not bitter, just mine. At noon, I opened the studio for the first appointment of the day. A bride and her mother. Nervous, excited, real. I welcomed them in with steady hands and a clear voice. They didn't know my story. They didn't need to. Because that was the quietest revenge of all, thriving in the ruins they left behind without inviting them in to see it. It was just after 6. The studio was closed, the floors swept, orders confirmed. I was locking up when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I knew the voice before it spoke. Heather, my mother. I didn't answer right away. The silence stretched so long she almost hung up. Then quietly, "You've made your point." I leaned against the counter, phone pressed to my cheek. "No," I said. "I made peace." "You embarrassed your sister." She embarrassed herself, a sharp breath. "She's devastated." "She's dishonest." My mother's tone hardened. "You think you're better than us?" "No," I replied. "I think I survived you." That stopped her. She didn't speak again for several seconds. When she did, her voice was smaller, but not softer. "You always had a flair for drama." That almost made me laugh. "Projection," I said. "You raised Megan to perform. You raised me to endure." "You're twisting everything." "No," I said. "You did. You twisted loyalty into obligation, expectations into silence. And when I didn't play along, you called it rebellion." "You were always so difficult." "No," I said again. "I was just different. You preferred Megan because she asked for approval. I built a life without it. She tried to pivot. Your grandmother would be ashamed of this." I smiled. "She left me the trust." Silence. I let it sit. "You altered the documents," I said. "I have her original draft. I had it certified. It's filed." Still, she said nothing. "She knew what you'd try to do," I continued. "She left breadcrumbs for someone who wouldn't flinch." "You're being vindictive." "I'm being precise." "You're ruining the family." "No," I said. "I'm ending the performance." If that breaks the family, then it was never whole. Another long pause. Then, so what now? I didn't hesitate. Now I move on, without pretending this was love. Her breath hitched. "Heather, we're still your parents." I almost softened. Almost, but then I remembered my laptop gone, my studio stolen, my silence expected. "You were my parents," I said, "until you chose image over integrity." I ended the call, not in anger, in closure. I set the phone down, walked outside, and breathed in the night air. The street was quiet. My sign above the door flickered gently. It no longer bore just my name. It bore weight, story, proof, that I could survive the ones who wrote me out of their script and build my own. The letter wasn't for her, not really, it was for me. I wrote it the day after the call, seated at my desk with the morning sun creeping through the blinds. The studio was closed, no orders, no deliveries, just silence. The kind I'd once dreaded and now treated like ceremony. I pulled out a blank sheet of linen paper. No logo, no studio mark, just space. And I wrote, "Mom, I used to believe love meant loyalty. That family meant sacrifice. That if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet long enough, earned enough, you'd finally see me. But I understand now, you always saw me. You just preferred the shadow of me. The version that didn't speak up. The one you could sculpt, redirect, erase. I spent years believing I was the problem. Too stubborn, too ambitious, too unwilling to play nice when the rules only applied to me. You used love like a leash and called it protection. You said Megan needed more when what you meant was Megan mirrored you better. And I reflected back something you didn't want to face. Truth, you taught me to endure and then punished me when I didn't break. You taught me to give and then resented what I built with it. You wanted credit without cost, control without question. But now I understand where I come from. And it's not you. It's the woman who left me letters in a lockbox and a legacy in ink. The one who saw me before I ever bloomed. Who named me not a flower, but the roots beneath. You said I'd regret cutting ties. But some things only grow when you stop watering the weeds. I don't hate you. I just no longer confuse your silence for shelter. Or your approval for love. Goodbye, Heather. I folded it once, slipped it into an envelope. Didn't seal it, just placed it in the fireproof box under my desk. Beneath contracts, beneath floral swatches, beneath the blueprint that once outlined someone else's dream. It would stay there, unsent, unread, but not unfelt, because that's the thing about real closure. You don't need applause, just clarity. That afternoon, I reopened the studio. The first client was early. A young woman, barely 25, nervous, hopeful, clutching a wrinkled printout of flower ideas. She didn't have a designer yet, just a vision. She looked around the shop, eyes wide. "I heard you know how to make things grow," she said. I smiled. "Yes," I told her, "I do." We sat, planned, built something from nothing, and this time, no one stood in the doorway to take credit. No one reached in to replace my name, because it was written everywhere already, on the door, on the roots, and now, finally, on the story.